Hello, this is KYC News. We have provided you with relevant and reliable information for the day. First and foremost, we wish him good health and heartfelt desire. Here are the main points. As the Knesset votes to dissolve, Israel sets a date for elections. Sri Lanka advances toward receiving IMF credit. As the Knesset votes to dissolve, Israel sets a date for elections. For the fifth time in less than 4 years, Israel's parliament has voted to dissolve itself and call elections for the nation in November. Prior to a formal motion to dissolve the Knesset, a parliamentary spokeswoman announced that Israeli MPs had earlier on Thursday decided to hold an early national election on November 1st. It happens at the same time that Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett declared on Wednesday that he would not run in the upcoming elections. Bennett oversaw a large but frail coalition government that disintegrated barely a year after taking office. "In my role as Prime Minister, Mr. Bennett remarked, I tried to care for all citizens, regardless of who they voted for. We demonstrated this year that people of all various viewpoints can cooperate. In a caretaker government headed by Yair Lapid, the coalition's architect and current foreign minister, Mr. Bennett's office said that he will continue to serve as the alternate prime minister. Even after becoming prime minister at the head of a coalition that included left-wing parties, Bennett, who once served as the head of the major settlement council for the occupied West Bank, continued to oppose the establishment of a Palestinian state. His administration made improvements to the West Bank and Gaza's economy, but it ruled out restarting the troubled peace process. After a protracted period of political stagnation that resulted in 4 elections in less than 2 years, Mr. Bennett attempted to bring the nation together. However, in the end, his own small party mostly fell apart as members rebelled against his coalition. Inciting its right-wing base against Mr. Bennett, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu accused him of betraying them by forming a partnership with left-wing parties and even an Arab faction. During Mr. Bennett's comments in the Knesset, Mr. Netanyahu's supporters frequently yelled and heckled him. His family has been threatened with death. Many assumed that Mr. Bennett would leave politics after the government was overthrown. In his speech, he declared that Yamina will be led by Ayelet Sheikht, a close ally and the departing government's interior minister. It is unclear if Yamina's chaos will benefit or harm its right-wing allies. If the party runs but falls short of the required number of votes, it may deny Mr. Netanyahu and his allies a potentially important ally. Alternatively, Ms. Sheikht may prove to be a kingmaker like Mr. Bennett. Sri Lanka advances toward receiving IMF credit. The International Monetary Fund reported positive discussions with Sri Lankan officials on Thursday, June 30th, giving rise to expectations that it would soon give preliminary approval for a loan facility to ease the country's current import payment crisis. The Extended Fund Facility, or EFF, is the name of the loan arrangement, and according to the IMF, the negotiations will continue virtually with a view to securing a staff-level agreement on the EFF arrangement in the near term. Prior to final approval by the IMF Executive Board, staff-level agreement is required, as is Sri Lanka's creditors' participation, which is not anticipated to happen right now. The IMF stated that as Sri Lanka's public debt is deemed to be unsustainable, Executive Board approval will require sufficient finance guarantees from the country's creditors that the debt's sustainability will be restored. Even with agreement at the IMF staff level, analysts predict that debt restructuring would take a long time. For the island of 22 million people, which has defaulted on some foreign debt, the financial crisis is the worst in decades. The nation has dangerously inadequate fuel reserves because there is little money available for imports. For a period of 2 weeks, the government on Tuesday curtailed funding for necessities including railroads, buses, and the healthcare industry. According to the IMF, the significant budget deficit must be lowered while ensuring that the weak and disadvantaged are adequately protected. To accomplish these goals, comprehensive tax reforms were urgently required because revenue was low. According to Udishan Jonas, chief strategist at stock research company Cal, the statement signals staff-level agreement will come in very soon and could activate bilateral and multilateral lenders to look at Sri Lanka favorably. With IMF assistance, Sri Lanka can secure pledges from its creditors. The administration has made significant strides in areas that are typically thought to be supportive of an IMF staff-level agreement, added he. Other issues that needed to be resolved, according to the IMF, included tackling the country's acute balance of payments difficulties, lowering its susceptibility to corruption, and implementing growth-enhancing reforms. Future of Australia and Asia is shared, according to Penny Wong. Foreign Minister Penny Wong is in the Malaysian city where she was born, and she claims that her experience proves that Australia is an Asian country, as evidenced by the fact that more than half of Australians were either born abroad or to immigrants. Wong made an official visit to Malaysia and stopped in Kota Kinabalu, the state capital of Sabah, where she spent her formative years for 8 years before moving to Australia. On her first trip to Malaysia since a Labour government took office last month, she told the reporters, "This is a very Australian experience since 1 in 2 Australians were either born overseas or have parents who were born overseas. It's important for Australia to communicate with Southeast Asia in a way that acknowledges our shared history and future with the region," she added. Results of the 5-year census were announced on Tuesday, and for the first time, they revealed that 51.5% of Australians were either migrants themselves or the children of migrants. "We are a multi-ethnic and diversified country. We ought to share that story more throughout the region," she added, because it is one of Australia's assets. In a speech the day before, Wong described how her Hakka Chinese grandmother had raised her children by herself in Sabah after the majority of the family perished in World War II. At the University of Adelaide, Wong's father received an Australian scholarship, which allowed him to rise out of the poverty he endured as a boy. He got married to an Australian woman, and they settled back in Kota Kinabalu to start a family. 20 years have passed since Mahathir Mohamad, a former Malaysian Prime Minister, made the infamous statement that Australia could not join an East Asian diplomatic group because they are Europeans, they cannot be Asians. Wong's remarks and official visit to Malaysia coincide with that statement. According to the census, the top source countries for the nearly 1/3 of Australian residents who were born abroad were Britain, India, China, New Zealand, and the Philippines, with Asian countries collectively being a bigger source than Britain and New Zealand. Mahathir had stated in a newspaper interview from 2019 that immigration would cause Australia to be more Asian than European in the future, but he did not immediately react to a request for comment.
Turkey has its largest deficit in its foreign trade in at least 9 years. Due to import growth that was over 3 times faster than export growth, Turkey posted its worst international trade shortfall in at least 9 years. The deficit reached $10.6 billion in May, the highest level since the start of the current reporting cycle in 2013. The deficit increased from $4.16 billion in May 2021 by more than double. According to data released on Thursday by the Turkish Statistical Institute, imports rose by an annual 43.5% to $29.6 billion last month, while exports rose by 15.3% to $19 billion. Turkey's import costs are rising as a result of an increase in the cost of commodities like energy. In addition, the central bank followed government directives and reduced loan rates, enticing businesses and individuals to spend more on imports despite the lira's depreciation. The trajectory currently seems unsustainable. Higher rates, a weaker currency, the IMF, contact a friend, or tighter capital controls are all choices for Turkey. Tim Ash, senior emerging markets analyst at London's Blue Bay Asset Management, made this statement. The rise in global commodity prices has been cited by the government as the cause of the trade deficit and an increase in inflation. The trade imbalance, however, climbed to $3.75 billion in May when energy and gold were excluded. Last month, inflation climbed to its highest annual rate since 1998, 73.5%. Turkey, a net importer, must use income sources like tourism sales or foreign exchange to cover its trade deficit. The latter alternative puts the Turkish currency, which lost 44% of its value last year, under selling pressure. In 2022, the currency has fallen another 20%. The trade gap in May increased the deficit for the year's first 5 months to $43.2 billion. When compared to the same period in 2021, the deficit increased by 136%. Turkey revealed a $46.2 billion shortfall for the entire 2017 fiscal year. Between January and May, imports increased by an annual 40.8% to $145.7 billion. When compared to exports, which rose by 20.4% to $102.5 billion, that was twice as fast. On Thursday, the lira was down 0.2%, trading at 16.67 to the dollar. Since 2018, Turkey has seen protracted episodes of currency instability. At the beginning of the year, the lira was valued at 3.78 to the dollar.
Divergent political perspectives on Bennett's departure. In preparation for leaving politics and handing over the reins to Yair Lapid until the 2019 elections, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett gave a farewell speech to the nation this evening. Political figures from across Israel's spectrum responded to the speech in a variety of ways, offering their opinions on how the outgoing Prime Minister performed. Commenting, Justice Minister Gideon Saar, Israeli nationalist Naftali Bennett. He was an effective prime minister who carried out his duties with dignity. For Israel and its people, we collaborated completely. He will undoubtedly come back in the future to serve the nation, in my opinion. Thank you and good success, Naftali. Thank you for all you have done for the citizens. We will continue to work together, Defense Minister Benny Gantz said. Aryeh Deri, the chairman of Shas, adopted a different viewpoint. Bennett, the first prime minister to don a kippah, misled the traditional right-wing camp and established a coalition that is particularly damaging to Jewish identity and the weak. The nation's other half was the target of a divisive and mocking campaign by those who extolled the virtues of unity. His decision to leave politics at the end of the year sends a strong statement about an unsuccessful experiment. Israel will soon be back on track thanks to us, Deri remarked.